2, 1. You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? The perfect organism. Its structural perfection is only matched by its hostility, by its hostile podcasters, because this is the Thursdays with Moire podcast. Thursdays, Tuesdays, Fridays, whatever the fuck. We haven't been able to run on Thursdays for a while. 84th
Wayne
episode.
Chung with Friday.
All
Sorry.
about
Wayne Chung
the
with Moire.
Alien. All about the Alien trilogy.
The-
I'm your host, Dean Taylor. Joining me tonight is two smartasses, my co-host, musician, artist, and filmmaker Devon King, and we've got an American over here. Who the fuck are you, Steven?
Game over, man. Yeah.
This isn't funny, man.
Howdy. Yeah, I'm Stephen Beeson, independent filmmaker, long-time listener, first-time caller of the show, big fan.
Bullshit. You're
Yeah,
They
no,
are
exactly.
not even close.
So it is funny. This trilogy was actually suggested by one of our fan participants of the Discord server, which if you're not a member of, you should. You can find this podcast on Spotify, on YouTube, all of those places. And we had a member submit this trilogy. He was not able to be here this week, so I get to fill in and talk about chest bursters. So it's not a bad night.
Yeah, well,
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Matthew Jacob, for suggesting this episode. If you're listening right now, buddy, thank you for 2 of these movies, and we'll see how we feel about the third one. Because there are only 3 Alien movies that ever existed. That's it. Nothing else was made. No, there's nothing else out there. Just 3 Alien movies that Fox attempted to make. All of which had terrible, horrendous behind-the-scenes stories. A lot of them kickstarted directors' careers, for better or for worse. All of them had a huge impact one way or another. Again, for better and for worse. Aliens, arguably even more so than Alien itself, which is saying something, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is... it is kind of funny, though, because I saw someone describe the Alien trilogy as 2.5 of the greatest films ever made. And I think that might be generous, but we'll get into that. So,
how apropos is it?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Spoilers! Guys, come on.
Well,
we all know where this is. I mean,
even...
we all know where this is going, but...
all
yeah,
right.
I think we
well,
do.
Regardless...
I think I'll start off with tonight. So Alien is the classic tale sci-fi horror film from director Ridley Scott and writer Dan O'Bannon. And the history of how this film came together was quite interesting. I'll try to piece it together based on what I remember seeing in behind the scenes, but I'll probably butcher it. So cite your sources elsewhere. I don't know why you're listening to a podcast to write your film essay. I remember writing a film essay for this film when I was in college, which I was going to dig up, but then I thought, it's going to be cringe, so I'm not going to do that. Because, man, I was shitty at essay writing, I'll say that. Brian, thanks for listening. I hope all is well. Anyway, non-sequiturs aside, Alien is a 1979 film written by Dan O'Bannon. The concept for this had been bouncing around for a little while. Dan, when he was in film school, created this little comedy film as his thesis project called Dark Star, which is kind of like a prototype version of this film with a more comedic tone. It was meant to be kind of a spoof of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but he wanted to try to develop it into a more serious project. John Carpenter, I think, directed that film, actually.
Yep.
Dark Star, which is, I think we'll have to review on the podcast sometime in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Dan O'Bannon had this concept for a while. He was working on it. He bounced off the idea with a few friends of his, and they introduced different ideas. It was someone else that came up with the idea of how the alien reproduces, which I think is really the visceral selling feature of this concept. Like it's this idea alone that really makes this thing terrifying. And I remember first experiencing this film. I think I was like 8 years old, which I think is a bit young to see Alien. But man, I just remember it having such a lasting effect watching it on a grainy VHS tape. The opening sequence with its very kind of ghostly camera moving these dark hallways of a darkened, really worn-in spaceship. I just remember those images really having this evocative um, effect on me watching that at that age, and I think that partially was what inspired me to maybe look into filmmaking or to see something in it. Like it was slow, but something about that really just captivated me at that age. And man, there's so many great like analyses of how that sequence foreshadows the rest of the events of the film. I'm not going to get into that here because I know Rob Ager hates it when people plagiarize his stuff, so I'm going to mention him by name and move on. I absolutely adore Rob Ager's content. I actually probably use him as a source more than anything when writing film essays. Needless to say, this film and I go way back. This was like my first foray into horror and like darker science fiction. And I think it's because of this film that I am just a sucker for that genre. Um, yeah, this is a huge film for me, and I can't understate that. Love it.
I just wanted to say real quick, I beat you. I was
Oh,
5 when I first
fuck
watched
you.
this movie because my dad thought it'd be a great idea to show this 5-year-old a movie about aliens. But he's like, it's a fun spaceship adventure. You'll love it. And then this was the only film that gave me nightmares. And
Incredible.
even to
No,
this day, yeah,
honestly, it's like it has that kind of staying power. I think it was
yeah.
because I saw Galaxy Quest or something beforehand, and my dad's like, "Hey, there's another movie that Sigourney Weaver was in, although it's a little spooky," and
Slightly
that was
different.
it's a little different in tone.
Slightly, yeah. A few more
But
character deaths.
oh man, but oh, there's something else that this reminded me of that I was gonna get into, but it'll come back to me as we're talking about it.
Fair
But
enough.
Steven, I know this was your first time seeing these films ever, so
What?
I am morbidly curious. How did these hit you?
Well, it is funny. This is the first time that I saw these films
God damn it.
for this podcast. It's interesting when I watched, and I mean, we'll go through all of them and my thoughts specifically. I'm actually I'm actually surprised that somehow I missed these films.
No shit.
No, I know.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
it's exactly
Quote
what
unquote
happened when
horror
it's
fan
like
over here.
when like I never saw The Thing, and everyone was shocked
yeah,
when I never
no,
saw The Thing.
well, and it is funny because we went through this with me before because I hadn't seen the Matrix films
That too.
prior to this podcast. So I'm I'm
Well,
glad I'm thankful
that's
for you
exactly
guys.
what this podcast is for. Like, this is what
Yep.
we're trying to introducing each other to these films that we
Oh,
were all
for sure.
experiencing at too young an age.
Yeah, well, I didn't have that experience. I did have a rather traumatic experience when I walked in one night and my father had left HBO on at the time, and it was Chasing Amy, and I was trying to
Boy.
figure out why these two
Scary.
women were hurting each other. But anyway, it's back to Aliens, or Alien. My reaction to seeing this was actually quite a bit like my reaction was to seeing um, Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween. And it's kind of funny you bring up Dark Star. And also kind of funny because Halloween came out the same year as the first Alien film. But,
Crazy.
but there's something about this film that I had to keep reminding myself, like, well, this feels almost derivative, but it's not. It's not that it's derivative. It just invented an entire genre.
It's weird. It's an originator, and it's weird to go back and to see it, and it feels so familiar. Like there's so many films that owe them that owe this
right
that owe to this film just because they're like carbon copies. Like, and I remember Ridley Scott saying when he was going to direct this that he wanted to create Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space.
I think he succeeded. I mean, there is something, extremely sort of, atmospheric about this film, and it's much more psychological than I think you you really you think of it nowadays. Like
It's psychological and psychosexual.
Yeah, quite
well, I mean
literally.
something phallic symbolism, right? But
something
you know,
something
Yeah.
vagina. But I think
yeah.
a bit large part in that is this is a very similar behind the scenes story to Jaws, where they were originally planning on showing more of the creature, but the suit just looked too goofy, and it was took too much time to set it up, and they couldn't quite get the angles on it right. They couldn't quite get the lighting right. It was a pain in the ass to use. So because of that, they actually refrained from showing the alien as much as possible until the climax. And
I
that's
think
Well, and I think
probably
the lighting does so much for that because there's a lot of strong like
absolutely.
backlighting and shadows and
You
silhouettes
don't see the
and
full
that
creature in most cases.
yeah, no, like that low key lighting and really Scott's like masterful, approach to the camera work, and I got to credit the cinematographer here as well, whose name I should
Absolutely.
know off the top, but I don't. Um,
I think they
they
also
no
no
shot
the
Blade Runner.
they they did an excellent job turning what would have been like a schlocky B sci-fi film because they were originally pitching this to be like a Roger Corman type project.
Really?
Um, and they just wanted, and they decided over, working over the years, they really wanted to elevate it to something else, and it became like a world-class movie, the way that they approached it.
well, and I mean that kind of ties into what I was talking about though, with the familiarity of this project and like what it means to not just sci-fi movies, not just horror movies, but like cinema itself. There's something about this film that is so timeless. And it is. It's like you're watching, Halloween and you're thinking to yourself, well, I mean, like, this is kind of like Friday the 13th, which I've seen. This is kind of like this, which I've seen. And it's like the grandfather of that. And so it's really interesting to go back and see something that is so fresh and new and original even today, but it's still like its effects
You
and
feel
the
its
ripples
effect.
of
Yeah.
that, yeah, can be felt even today in stuff that we probably watched last week. You know what I mean?
I do.
That is an incredible testament to how this film has stood the test of time. And I think it's interesting. Obviously, none of us were alive during the time that this film was released, but my mother was actually 19 years old when this was released, and she saw it for the first time when it first opened
Wow.
in Houston, Texas. And it was funny because she was telling me that, she saw it and she loved it and it was this experience. And she related another story to me that she had gone back to the cinema to go see another film about a week later. And I don't know what that was, but I kind of wish I do now. But, she was saying that she went to the theater again and watching another film entirely, you could hear the audience on the other side of the theater, in the other, projector, screaming because they had just gotten to the part where the chest burster comes out. Like,
Yeah.
this
Man.
was one of those films that it wasn't even marketed as a film, it was an experience. And it's so much, and I mean, that's almost become like a dirty word now with the whole like Marvel thing, you know? But this was like you're going to see something you've never seen before.
Oh
Even
yeah,
after
and
all
I
these
think
years.
I
Yeah.
think The Exorcist may have opened the floodgates to that a little bit. I think
Oh,
that was like
100%. 100%. Yeah.
I can't imagine the fires that caused in the Bible Belt too, like the
Oh, well,
way.
yeah. I've
But
got stories about that too, but
oh
it's
boy, but yeah, no, I can't imagine just seeing this film for the first time in cinema, when it was first coming out. That would have been a hell of an experience, as you say. And I think that chest burster scene, um, what you were talking about, like that's like the titular turning point for this whole film that really throws everything in motion. And I think the reason that it worked so well, um, is because the reactions from the cast and crew were authentic.
Hmm.
they
Like
were
they didn't,
genuine, yeah.
yeah, they didn't know to what extent you know the effect of the chest burster would have. They didn't know that it was going to come out through his chest. I think, like, especially one actress, I think her name's Nancy.
Yeah,
or
she
maybe that
didn't
was
know
the
she was
character.
gonna get blood on her either. So when she was just like, "Yeah, ew, gross," like that was just
Yeah.
because they sprayed a
and,
bunch
Oh
of
my
corn syrup
god!
on her.
and that's exactly what they also did for The Exorcist. I think when the priest was gonna get vomited on, they said it was gonna end up on his chest, but it ended up on his face, and
Yeah.
they did a lot of other things to get reactions out of the cast and
Well,
crew.
and it's also funny because I believe the actress that you're talking about was originally planned for the part of Ripley, so she didn't even know that she had been downgraded, in the
Dang.
cast.
Till the
And
last
so,
day. Yeah.
yeah, till like the last day. So not only is she kind of like bummed out, it's like, oh my god,
I gotta go for this
But
shit. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
Well,
okay.
right.
She's
I think something
yeah.
about that dynamic keeps the tension throughout. Like even if you know going in from the reputation of the film that Ripley survives, it's hard to tell. Like just with how the team dynamic plays out, like who's gonna go next. Like
Mm.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I will say this, and this kind of is one of the things that I think has not aged particularly well, is there's this kind of sense of deliberate pacing.
Mhm.
Whereas when you're watching this for the first time and you were in that theater and you're experiencing it, it's like you don't know what's going to happen. But like today, looking through it, through looking at it through like a modern lens, we're more like, okay, I know that somebody, like, I know somebody's about to die. You know what I mean?
Really. But
I
But
I
think that
say
also
any good
comes
horror
back
movie
to
does that though.
how this film has just been so influential to others that they've just copied the same kind of
well,
formula.
that's it.
And
Yeah,
now
and
and,
it's
and
hard
now
to.
looking back, it just becomes more apparent and now it's more predictable. But at the time, it was absolutely
Oh,
fresh.
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to hold that against it. Is kind of what I'm saying. It's like it's yeah, it's a classic, and for a reason. I mean, this film is. I guess that was kind of the biggest thing that was that I got out of it is like the ripple effect. You know.
The
It's
Ripley effect.
fascinating. Yeah.
Ah,
And I think
got
I just want to point out this film was released in 1979, and the practical effects look incredible. Like this film has some of the best set design I've ever seen in a movie. Like the derelict ship,
Oh
it
my
feels
God.
so lived in and so believable. Like how it's constantly, because it's not perfect. There's so many little imperfections to it, but that adds so much to the atmosphere. And then you get to the alien, like the actual layer for the aliens, and it's so immaculately designed. H.R. Geiger, who did the infamous for doing the creature designs and artwork for the Alien trilogy as a whole, he did a fantastic job. And I just kind of pictured like the amount of time it would take to actually build those sets and build those details, and
Oh yeah.
especially when you see kind of the pilot hooked up to the to the alien ship, just kind of
Yeah, the
frozen there like a statue. Like it's so it perfectly thrives on that mystery, and I think that's why the deliberate pacing doesn't bug me at all in this movie, is because it always earns it. It's always earning your
mm.
attention. It never felt like it was wasting my time because
Oh, 100
what
percent.
I
is
have to
around
say,
me was
that
fascinating.
that space jockey set was such a big set piece. Even though they were only going to be there briefly, they put so much time into it, and they wanted to make sure that every moment it was on film was not wasted. Because they wanted to build this thing in full scale. They didn't want to fake it with a miniature. They wanted the actual actors to be able to
Good.
walk on set and show you that it's a fully built out thing, and it looks absolutely immaculate. And I think H.R. Giger himself actually was even on there helping design it and airbrushed every inch of it himself, which that time, that type of artistic dedication to real built sets is something you don't see that much these days. But I think it absolutely sells the effect and sells the scale of this. Like it looks like a real preserved alien creature who's just been kind of locked in this,
Just
you know,
mummified almost, like it's stuck in
well, in
time.
this machine thing, like there's something about the design of it too, where it has like a viewer screen just like permanently fixed to its face, and
Yeah,
it just it's like
so
locked in. It's
weird.
really sad the way you look at how it's designed. Like it's been built and designed to kind of just be stuck in this spot and to do the job constantly. It's very dystopian. Um,
Hmm.
but
Oh no,
It
the
just
the
yeah,
production design is incredible. I mean, it almost feels reminiscent of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space
I'd say it's
Odyssey, which
better.
I think I think up until this point in cinema, that was kind of the, definitive sci-fi film. And so to try and, top that is, no small feat in and of itself.
Yeah. And part of it is, like, the visual effects look fantastic and everything, the atmosphere, the world building. Like you said, the lighting is fantastic. Now, if that means anything, if we don't care about the characters involved, and I always appreciate just how real these characters felt. They don't feel like characters, they feel like people. Like, there was a line I think the director of Lawrence of Arabia said once where I like to write characters I just want to sit down and have dinner with. And I just want to hang out with all of these characters. Like, they all feel so real and believable. None of their decisions, okay, most of their decisions, cough cat at the end of the movie, cough, made tangible sense. Like, I love Harry Dean Stanton and his partner just always complain about work, always talk about how they want to go home. Because I've met so many construction workers and so many, like, low rate, low wage workers.
Blue collar.
Yeah, blue collar workers
And,
that have that exact same personality. Like, I feel like I've met all of these people at some point in my life.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's the one thing that this film like did that was kind of distinct from other sci-fi films at the time is it had, basically these truck drivers in space, these blue collar type worker attitudes in space, and it makes it feel much more personable and relatable for a lot of people, especially if you're working in that kind of, level, or at least people like that, or you live that kind of life yourself.
Well, and I think I think that ties into kind of an overall theme that kind of permeates throughout these movies. Mm-hmm. Not so much the third one, but especially this one and the second one.
The third one a little bit.
Anyway,
I do have to say, since I started working in a factory, watching this now, it hits even more close to home, which is weird.
Well, no, I mean, but the theme of these films is like there's a coldness and there's a darkness, but there's always this sort of like warm center. There's a sense of humanity. And I feel like, and I know we're going to get to the third one, but it's like that to me was kind of what was missing from the third one is this sense of, there's a center, there's something there. And I had that in the first one. I had that in the second one where it's like, I care about these people. I don't want to see them get ripped to shreds.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like even characters.
Movie...
Yeah, go on.
No. I mean, just for a horror movie to be able to accomplish that, even today, is like unheard of. People talk about, Midsommar, one of these like great horror movies. I don't care about a single character. They're all assholes.
Maybe the main character.
Like, I feel like the dread that comes from watching these people that you actually give a shit about, it makes it that much more frightening when you're able to look at it and recognize someone like you're talking about and be like, oh, I know that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now the horror of watching him, get ripped to shreds, I mean, my God, that's so much worse.
So much more visceral. But it's the main reason I can't stand most slasher movies, because they have that exact problem where you just don't care about any of them, or they're designed or written in a way where you want to see them get murdered, so you just feel nothing but maybe like a bit of like tingly satisfaction. Like, it's the same reason I didn't like the original Black Christmas very much, because the whole time I was just thinking, where's the part where I should care? Like, I don't like any of these women. I don't care if any of them get murdered. Like, I just don't care. And it's so easy.
Schadenfreude.
It's so easy just to make characters you care about by just making them relatable and interesting and unique from one another. Like, they all have that worker class personality, but they all also feel very distinct from one another, and their introductions are very important in establishing their characters.
Well, and I mean, I think it can work in some films. I mean, the characters in something like Nightmare on Elm Street are not particularly, I mean, depending on which film, right? Like, they're not particularly great, interesting, developed characters, but they, you have all of this like personality from the villain and, that sort of thing. And I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it can work, but in the context of this film, it works so much better to
especially
have this
with
sort
its
of like, this tangible sense of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like anytime, again, like that whole I want to have dinner with these characters. You're just like, what are these characters doing when they aren't working? Like, what are these characters doing at home? What are these characters doing back on Earth? Like that added level of intrigue just adds so much to the characters. It makes you want to see them get out alive, and all of the performances are pretty top. Most of the performances are pretty top notch. I'll get to that in a second. The actress who didn't become Ripley for a reason, but like,
Ah,
of course,
well, I mean,
Sigourney Weaver's. Yeah.
I
Uh,
wouldn't hold that against her. I
I don't
mean,
know. I thought she was kind of. There was some line delivery, so it was just like, and like especially compared to
I
everyone
did.
else, I thought she was a little bit iffy.
I will say, I thought Harry Dean Stanton was incredible. It was
He's
really
always
cool to
incredible.
see him. I mean, he is, but it's always cool to go back and see old movies and like see him pop up.
Yeah,
Uh,
he looks so young.
I,
Yeah, man.
I had I had this thought of like David Lynch sitting at home watching Alien and watching Harry Dean Stanton wander around and meow and being like, "That's it. That's the guy."
That's. Oh yeah.
I mean, it's so. I mean, yeah. But anyway,
But incredible
no,
cast all around. Like Ian Holm,
I
God rest his soul, is also like fantastic. I love him as
Yafet,
Ash.
Yafet Kato was actually like really impressive to me. I
Yeah.
thought he was fantastic,
Also, God rest
and
his soul.
I liked his performance because here's the thing: when you go back and you look at older movies, especially like horror movies, but a lot of movies of this era, and I'll use Ghostbusters as kind of a de facto example.
Here we
But
go.
it's like there's so many of these films that it's like, oh, well, here's this guy, and he's on the team, and this is his personality. And then this guy, he's kind of an affable dork or whatever. And then this guy, he's got this kind of slimy sleazeball, personality. And then this guy, he's like the black guy. I mean, it sounds terrible, but like so many of those characters get like relegated to the background in a way. And this character actually had some agency. He felt like
No, like
his own person.
I really like the guy that the black guy. His name was Yaphet, like the actor, and I thought I thought he did a terrific job. And I remember hearing a story about when he was signed on to the project that he knew that this was going to be a good film, that this was going to be a classic. He was gung ho about it from the get go, and I thought he did a terrific job throughout.
100%.
And
he was also in Live and Let Die. He was in The Running Man.
He was
I
like
mean,
a
just
fun little character actor
Parker.
of sorts.
Oh yeah,
Parker was
Yeah.
it's fun. It's funny. I remember the actor's name before I remember the character's name. I don't know why.
Same
Well,
here.
but no, I mean, I thought everybody did a pretty fantastic job. I think Sigourney Weaver was by far the best.
Well, of course. There's a reason she's the lead star in 2 more movies after this.
I mean, you're not going to let this go, are you? I mean,
No,
I
I'm
think
not.
the lady did fine.
No, I
think
mean,
you're...
no, that's not what I mean. I mean, Sigourney Weaver, like, proved
Oh, I
herself
see.
with this movie, is what I meant to say.
Oh,
when she
100%.
absolutely
Well,
nails
and
it.
Ridley Scott even said that I'm not sure exactly the story, but it sounded like maybe Ripley's part became even bigger throughout the production process
seem that
because of
Maybe
how
that was
much...
it. Because the way each of the characters are written, they were kind of written in a bare bones way. They weren't written with a lot of depth. Like they had some little bit of backstory here and there, but there wasn't as nearly developed as like the main creature and everything. But the fact that they were kind of written without a particular like gender in mind, that they were all written as just like members of this crew, I guess kind of gave them a blank slate to work with and to kind of, you know, be able to play around with the gender roles a little bit, which was pretty big for the time, and I think really helped um, neutralize the characters in a more, I don't know, it makes it feel a little more grounded than the way these characters might have been played up in other films, and I thought they did a terrific job with it.
Yeah.
And we have even talked about, like, the big kind of satirical element of all these films is that, like, capitalism just controlling these low-level workers and taking advantage of them. And that's something like
I
all of
think
these movies explore to an extent, which is like really interesting kind of thematic connection between them. And I'm kind of glad like these 3 films, even Alien Free, stuck to that at least to some extent, but this film definitely explored it
Yeah.
the most. Like Mother
It
being
shows
this,
like the
yeah, go on.
negatives. Yeah, it shows the negative sides of like corporate influence. Mother's this very controlling, micromanager that they have to,
Put up with.
report to. And also, one interesting like detail that's right up front is it tells you that there's like 60 million tons of like iron ore on this ship or something. Like it's a statistical, fact about the cargo they're carrying that really doesn't come into play in the movie. But the fact that that information is there shows that that is what's at stake, and that's what the corporation's really concerned about more than anything. They're concerned about the material they're carrying more than the crew. And there's also even like this conspiracy idea or theory that they sent them to this planet to pick up this organism that they knew was there, and because they wanted the bioweapon. I guess it became more of a plot thing in the second film, but that is also something that could have been there from the get-go.
And the whole idea of crew expendable, like we're gonna send these low class workers to do the most dangerous work imaginable because we just don't care about their livelihood. We care about the profit they bring back to us. That whole element was also there's also like a lot of comparisons to mine workers. Like they have to contact their boss over the phone. Like they have to contact Mother by typing to her instead of actually talking face to face. There's like the space. The actual ship is very much like a mine with lots of dark tunnels and lots of like everything's breaking all at once. Everything's really dangerous and really
Well,
badly
I
put
did.
together.
I think
Interesting way of looking at it.
No, it is interesting. I mean, there's definitely a sort of critique on capitalist sort of big money, society in a way that kind of permeates throughout all of these films. And I think you actually feel it the most in Aliens. But I was actually reading that Alien 3, when they originally started working on the script, the plan was that the Earth society would be like this sort of Marxist rebellion, and it was like
just for all to
the
sell the out the window.
space communist versus like the big greedy capitalist libertarian oligarchs, and it was going to be like a Cold War allegory.
Oh man,
which I thought was fascinating, and I almost wish we had gotten that because that's
I'm
at
I'm
least
glad we
interesting.
didn't.
Yeah, I'm also glad we didn't. That would have not
well,
aged well. Anyways,
it
back
would
to
have been better than what we got. But moving on.
moving on. Music. Jerry Goldsmith hates the soundtrack to this movie. Like every great song ever, the composer just hates the soundtrack. Ennio Morricone infamously hated this soundtrack for The Thing. John Carpenter wasn't too happy with the Halloween soundtrack and was surprised they used it. And now it's the same here. It's like all of these great horror composers just hate their best work for whatever reason, to be humble, I guess. But I thought that was like an interesting tidbit of information. The opening theme alone is just so perfect. Like the build up, the tense noises, and I forget what instrument is played towards the end of the song, but it's kind of become iconic with the Alien franchise, and it comes in at just the perfect time. Like when you're seen inside the spaceship for the first time, it's just wow! It builds this sense of mystery and wonder, and you're just glued to the screen at that point. Again, despite its deliberate slow pacing, it wasn't wasting my time in any sense, and the music really helped build on that atmosphere for me.
No, I mean, it is funny. I mean, I think a lot of composers do go through that sort of like imposter syndrome in a way. I mean, Hans Zimmer supposedly hated his score to The Lion King,
That's true.
which is arguably is one of his masterpieces, if not his magnum opus in a way.
Agreed.
And no, I mean, it is fascinating to see these people at the top of their career who have created some of the most influential music of all time, and yet they don't even believe that themselves. So
Well,
really,
it's interesting because I remember this conversational point coming up a little bit when Hans Zimmer was talking about his score for Dune, which there's a lot of interesting cross pollination here. Dan O'Bannon came away from working with Jodorowsky, who was trying to adapt Dune way back in the day, and it was the falling out from that production that led to this production in a weird sense. But Hans Zimmer was talking about when he was scoring Denis Villeneuve's Dune, how he wanted to get away from using like the Western score and put more Eastern influences in it that sounded a little more alien, um, ironically, and that's something that actually, the Jerry Goldsmith score in this film is very much like a symphonic Western type of score. Um, and then I remember seeing a comment on that Hans Zimmer interview, where it was someone from India saying that this is interesting because to him, growing up in the Eastern, world, it was Western sounding symphonic scores that sounded more alien to him. Um, where the influences that Hans Zimmer was pulling from sounded more familiar to someone there. So it's interesting how just the other side of the world sounds more alien to us, and then we use that as an influence. Really, we're just kind of commenting on each other's outer cultural differences when talking about aliens, which I find it funny that words used a lot to describe people that aren't from where you live, um,
Well, there is that
even on our
element
own
of,
planet. Yeah.
no, I mean, there is that element of social commentary that a lot of great horror films have. Um, I mean, I think, yeah, I think there's something there about, the original Alien, and, Aliens was kind of intended as this, critique on like the Vietnam War. And so I think it's a fair assessment to kind of bring in those sort of ideas when we're talking about these films that, often are using allegories or metaphors. And I think for what it's worth, the first two films in this franchise, they do it in a way that is not, it's not overbearing. It doesn't beat you over the head. It gives you an idea of what this film is about, but it's so well executed and so nuanced, that it's really refreshing to see in kind of today's landscape.
Absolutely. I think sorry, I'm just kind of reading what we're chatting in the Discord. It's like we're doing two things at once here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I know.
But
Well, I mean, are we ready to give a rating? Do
Yeah,
we have final
honestly, I
thought?
don't know what else to say about it. It's Alien. Like, what can we add
it's
to it that
Alien.
billions of people haven't said already?
It's such a
Exactly.
classic. Everything's been said. I wrote an essay on this like 4 years ago that was totally cringe. I
What's the
remember
title?
thinking and overthinking about it, and I just come back to it, and I just want to enjoy, monster movie in space. It's fun. It's a good time. It's
Yeah.
fuck it. This is a 10 out of 10 movie for me, bud.
Ooh.
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 Yeah.
Starting out strong.
It would be a
I
10 out
don't
of
know.
10 if it wasn't for the one actress I talked about, and
Oh my
Ellen going
god.
back for that cat.
Stop harping on her. She's great.
Ellen
Oh,
going
okay.
back for that cat.
I have a funny story about the cat.
All right, go on.
Jones, who I love that he's a recurring character in the next movie as well. I love him in this. But apparently, so there's two conflicting pieces of information I've heard about this. One, on IMDb, it says that in order to get the cat Jones to hiss on camera, they hid a German Shepherd behind a
Yep.
screen and then revealed him at the right moments, and that got the cat to hiss. But according to the audio commentary I listened to, because I've seen these films so many times, I just watch them with audio commentary to get more insights. I wish I wrote notes. I'm just trying to misremember them as we're going through this. But they said that um, the best way to get a cat to hiss on camera is another cat that it doesn't know. So it could be a German Shepherd or it could have been a cat that they had off screen. But
That's kind of great.
Yeah.
oh yeah,
It's very clever
Well,
solution, that's for sure. Despite those two glaring nitpicks, this is also like in my top 10 films ever made. Like, holy crap, we were constantly talking about like some of my favorite films ever this year. Like, I've gotten so lucky to talk about these movies on this podcast. It's
man,
wonderful,
thank God
haunting.
for whoever does the schedule on this
Yes,
podcast.
you know me
Shout
so
out to
well,
him.
Matt. 9.6 out of 10 for me. It's not quite a 10 out of 10, but it's 9.6. It's as close as to a 10 as most films are ever gonna get for me.
Well, I'm gonna give this a solid 9. It's not quite a 10 for me. I think the pacing might make it a little bit difficult on rewatch. But yeah, man, holy crap. It's a masterpiece for a reason. I'm saving the 10 for later in this episode. But yeah, I mean, what more can you say? It's Alien.
I
Go
know.
watch it. Don't
If
be
you
like me
haven't
and
seen
wait.
it yet, you're not a real
Yeah.
horror fan until you see it, like Steven.
Yeah,
The-
well,
the-
now I get to be a horror fan, so
It also has one of the most iconic opening text reveals ever. Like
Mhm.
there was a concept, I just remembered this, that they wanted to do something with like bones and guts and viscera to spell out alien, but it was just a little too like over the top and kind of grotesque for an opening. It would have made it really cheesy too, I think.
yeah, I don't
So
think that would have worked.
just
Not
going
at all.
for a basic text where where it reveals the letters one line at a time. I don't know. There's something so eerie and also kind of classy about that. Like it's very subtle, but I remember just like watching it, just seeing it slowly kind of spell out. And I like that the film kind of makes you focus on this and really take the time to really unfold. Like it is deliberate pacing, but it absolutely works, and it just creates this evocative atmosphere every single time. I just get chills every time I watch it, and I get
Perfectly
excited.
establishes the tone and atmosphere.
Hmm
Also, one of the most famous taglines of all time in space, "No one can hear you scream," which is such a disturbing, terrifying tagline that just makes me wish most taglines didn't make me want to throw up in my mouth. Speaking of
This
throwing,
had some of the best marketing for its time as well.
yeah,
Like
holy
Oh,
shit,
100%. And
I
that's
use the
one
original,
thing.
Ian, I always love when you dig up like these fan posters for the films that we do, but for this
Yeah.
one, I just had to go with the originals because that original Alien poster is
so
just so
creepy.
iconic for a reason, but it's also it's very kind of restrained in its design as well. Like it's very simple and kind of classy, and I think you could almost cite this, and this term gets thrown around a lot, and I know Steven hates it, but I think elevated horror is what you could
Well,
call this, being the original tentpole of,
I could,
it's not
I
just your
could.
cheesy sci-fi, it's not just your low-rate horror film. This is, more than that.
No, I'd be willing to agree with that. I mean, I'm going to introduce the next film. I do want to take this moment to just, because Ian brought up taglines, there's one thing that always bothers me when we talk about taglines is that so many horror films today, they did this with Hereditary, they've done it like over the last 15 years at least. There's been 200 films that have come out, and the tagline is, it's the scariest film since The Exorcist. I
Yeah.
Oh, fuck,
Oh,
I hate
hate
that.
it.
well,
I
okay,
hate
Me
it.
too.
there's a really
it.
cheesy one that I can't help but like, even though it's just as terrible. It's for a Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I literally have like a 3D relief like statue thing of this that I
Oh,
have in my
yeah, I
second hand.
think I
It
know what
says
you're talking.
a different set of jaws, and it shows like the close up of the lips. I love it,
I
just
That's
because
mean,
it's
kind of
so
funny.
well,
it's not,
that's. I mean,
yeah,
that's different. I
That's
mean,
clearly a
that's.
parody. Yeah.
the
Yeah,
different set of jaws. Hoo ha ha.
yeah, yeah.
Ooh, haha. Shark
Well,
bait. Speaking of
uh,
throwing up after being away for a long time, aliens. Steven?
oh, excuse me. Well, aliens. Or as James Cameron initially pitched this, alien dollar sign.
James
Alien.
Cameron, I wanna be
Yeah,
your cameraman. That's the
James
that is
Cameron
literally
is
the
famous
story of how this film came to be. James Cameron was a hotshot young director, hot off the success of the Terminator films. I believe he had done some work on Rambo as well by this point.
he.
They were
I think he did the first Terminator film. He hadn't done the second one yet, but it was
well,
because he did this film that allowed him to create his second one. If I'm not,
yes,
if
and
I remember correctly.
the
Hmm.
pitch was he walked into a production room meeting with the blackboard behind him. He drew the word alien followed by a dollar sign, and that is how
What a
Aliens
gamester.
was born. It is the sequel to the 1979 science fiction horror film Alien. It is the second film in the Alien franchise, which means it's the last film in the Alien franchise. It is set in the far future, where Sigourney Weaver, returning as Ripley, is awakened from her cryo state, and communications are lost with this human colony, and she has to go to this moon and save these people, or do they need saving? What's going on? It has a ragtag group of space marines beside her. This film features phenomenal performances from Bill Paxton, may he rest in peace, Michael Biehn, Lance Hendrickson. I mean, this film is, as Quentin Tarantino himself once described it, everything that you could want in a sequel and more. It delivers.
Very apt. I 100% agree. I think, well, before Ian, I don't know what your angle on this, Ian, is yet, but I think that this is an absolutely exceptional sequel, and I think it succeeds in a couple ways. It takes enough from the original that it is a faithful, like, follow-up story, but it also does its own thing with it. Like, it's not the slow build, suspenseful horror that the first one is exactly. Like, it absolutely has those elements and it still plays with them, but it also ups the ante in a way that feels organic. And I like how it picks up where the last one left off, yet there is this time gap of 60 years that she's been in cryosleep. I absolutely love the opening shots of this film where it's like these cold, kind of nebulous clouds in space, and you just see the frost and the dust in her ship as they find her. I love James Cameron's like use of blue lighting in the films of this
Oh
era.
my god.
It's
The
such a mood setter.
cinematography this is incredible.
And it was such an interesting choice that he went to full 35 mil instead of anamorphic, which is like a different aspect ratio. And it's because he hated working with anamorphic lenses. He's just said that it created problems with composite and VFX because it was hard to get the look to match right.
Interesting.
But I admire that direction that he had with this, and he was always trying to create something that made the processing for effects work better later on, and I think
Well,
they absolutely hold up.
well, and here's the thing. I mean, this film, we talked about this with Alien, but with Aliens, I mean, this is a film that has been listed on several greatest films of all time lists. This film launched the careers not just of James Cameron himself, but Michael Biehn and Bill Paxton. Sigourney Weaver. I mean, if she wasn't big from Alien, I mean, this skyrocketed her. This was number 30 on Empire Magazine's 500 greatest films of all time.
Mm-hmm.
This is like everything that I wanted and more. I honestly, I mean, I can't think of enough good things to say. I honestly prefer this to the original, and I know a lot of people kind of go back and forth about which one they prefer. They're obviously doing different things and they're going for a different tone, but Aliens to me is like the perfected version. And I think it's so interesting because it's hard enough to follow up to one of the greatest horror movies of all time and to live up to that legacy, if not succeed it.
It's insane.
But it's even more so to do that in a totally different genre.
Yeah. And here's the thing.
I wouldn't even say that it's a completely different genre, but he takes enough of like what sets the mood and the atmosphere of the original, and there's enough of those elements there, but then he paints it in a different light, and he does up the ante with the action, but it still does build in those horror elements just as well, and it expands the world in a very
For sure.
interesting way. So yeah, like I think there's a lot of overlap between the two. There's just enough overlap that it works, but it does bring it into that action realm more when you introduce the Marine characters.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like normally I hate it, like absolutely loathe it when we go from a film with a more deliberate tone to a more action-packed tone. Like I think of the Total Recall remake, or you could argue the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies and everything onwards, where they take the slow, deliberate, good intentions of the original source material and just turn the actions schlock. And somehow I never quite figured out how this film avoided that trap, and I think it's like you said, Steven, there's no false pretenses. It isn't trying to be like the original film, at least a carbon copy of it. It just does its own thing. It's like, yeah, we're an over the top horrific action movie, and we know it. Like, we're gonna wrap that around us
Well,
like a warm
it
blanket,
doesn't.
and it works
No,
because of
it
that.
doesn't apologize for itself. And this is
Exactly. Yeah.
no, it's just this is what we're doing. Buckle up.
Yeah, this
That's
is what
the
we're
best
doing.
way
This is
I
what's
know.
happening. Like, even the marketing was like that too. It's like there's more aliens, more action, more danger. Like, they weren't afraid to embrace the more action-packed tone, and I really respect that because, like, if you look at Star Trek Discovery, for example, they hype that up as, oh, we're going back to old Star Trek. It's all about exploration and discovery, and then the first episode, it just turns into an action schlock fest with lots of melodrama. Like, that's pure false marketing, but there's no BS here in Aliens whatsoever, and yeah, this film's fantastic. I don't like it as much as the first Alien, but it is one of the best action movies ever made, regardless, and it has
Well,
definitely
I
earned
mean,
its right
Really neck and
in
neck
pop
for
culture.
me. Like, I don't hold much, like, one in much less or higher regard than the other. They are both just like yin and yang as far as I'm concerned. Like, they absolutely
They can't live
to
without each
perfectly
other.
me,
connect and correlate.
I mean, to me, if this is like Star Wars, I mean, this is like The Empire Strikes Back.
I'd say
This
that's
is
pretty
the
different, though, because
well,
they're going for
I
different
mean,
things, different
I mean, they're
tone.
going for different things, but this is like everything that you liked about the original, plus all of these new elements, building
That's
on
true.
the world. We're taking all these steps forward. We're
And-
learning
yeah.
more about these characters. We're developing these characters in a way that complements the original because, again, these are characters that have a sense of community and a sense of, identity. I mean,
Yeah,
it's so hard to do that in sci-fi horror, and yet
especially
all of these
action
characters.
sci-fi horror. And
Exactly right.
I alluded to like the introductions being especially important for establishing a character's personality, and that's nailed once again in this movie with the Colonial Marines. Like, what's Bill Paxton's first interaction with the general? Is like, what are you waiting for? Shoes and slippers? Gee, would you, sir? That would be great. Look into my eye, Private. And right there, we know the relationship between these two characters. We know that Hicks is like stubborn. He's an asshole. He's lazy. But he's also like really cocky and
He also
arrogant.
puts
And that's it.
he puts on a whole macho like facade, and he's complaining about a cold floor.
The ultimate badass.
And
No.
I love that whole interaction between him and Vasquez as well. Like, what's the first line he says to
Oh,
her?
hey Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man? No, have you?
No,
Like-
I mean it's incredible. I mean this film, I mean it feels like it's kind of weird to just talk about this film in terms of how great it is, but the cinematography is incredible. This film is
Looks gorgeous.
beautifully
And there's lots
shot.
of great
Gorgeous.
wide shots,
Exactly.
like long takes. Like I love the opening shots inside the the Colonial Marines ship, which looks like a Halo assault rifle. But that was kind of distracting
No,
this
I
time
mean,
around. But
the-
the shots
the
inside,
thing-
like it's just long, quiet shots that show like the racks of guns, the tables set up with food on the table. And it again, it's just so much visual storytelling. So much of the environment is clear to the viewer. There's a great sense of geography and space in every frame, and that's something that's hard to get right in an action horror movie. Like, that's something you have to nail, is just the sense of space and the sense of surroundings, not only to make the action cohesive, but to also like build on the horror and keep everything grounded. And that's something they absolutely nail through like both the visuals and very clever use of exposition. Like, the exposition, when they do use it, is very clean and to the point. And I think that's just because it has so much great visual storytelling to help back it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I mean, here's the thing. It's so like you were talking about with the Vasquez,
Vasquez,
that
yeah.
interaction, setting up everything you need to know about these characters. That's something that you see in these kind of movies done so much worse. Like,
Yes.
we kind of
Avatar.
talked about this with,
Avatar.
like, No,
Sorry.
no, we've talked about this with like M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening. You know, it's like, oh, this guy likes hot dogs. That's
This
his
guy,
entire
this guy likes
personality.
math. He always brings up math problems. Get it? He's a math
No,
teacher.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this film gives these characters a sense of personality in a few lines,
Without being stupid
and they
about it.
never feel like caricatures. They
Yeah.
feel like people you've met
Mhm.
or you know. You feel elements of them. It makes the horror that much real. It
Yeah,
complements the theme of the original of this sense of community, this sense of humanity.
they have a really good like camaraderie between the crew,
No,
and I
they
think that's
do.
really I think that's what really I think that the part that's really overlooked that really grounds these films and really makes this otherworldly horrific space adventure like the way that really connects the audience is the human element, and I do think the camaraderie between the Marines, but also Ripley's character and her like I don't know. Steven? Did you watch the theatrical cut or did you see the director's cut of this?
I watched I believe the director's cut of all three, though for Alien 3 I think it's called the assembly cut.
It's the I thought it was the
I see,
editor's
yeah.
cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think so there's a plot point that was cut out of the theatrical version, which I think really, you know, solidifies this film and Ripley's character is that she finds out, well, we find out that she had a daughter on Earth who was 11 years old when she had left,
God,
and then
yeah.
she had died, like her daughter on Earth, and she like never met her growing up. And I think that also I love the room that she's in where it's like there's a fake screen that shows like a forest and like the whole idea that they put behind as that when you're, you know, out so far from Earth, out in space, you want some kind of natural comfort like that. So they would have rooms like that, and I really love the design of those. And the fact that that's where she finds out that her daughter died, I think really, sets up to her feeling like a failure as her mother, and then she finds Newt, this lost girl that has been trying to survive on this, base where these aliens are rampant, and then her having kind of like a second chance to be a mother to somebody, and I really love that character growth in this, and I feel like that grounded human element really makes this film work, and that, you know, it's not overlooked, but I do think it's not talked about as much, but I do think that that is what grounds these films is that element of it.
Well, and I mean, it's funny because like I mean, the best way that I know to describe this is like we talked about this with Alien. It's like imagine taking an elevated film and elevating it again. Like
In a different direction.
it's
Yeah.
the direction is incredible. Like you're talking about, the characters are so human, and so you have this emotional attachment to them within the first 5 minutes of screen time. The script economy on this is incredible. Like I mean, just setting all of this up. It's a long, slow build up, and then when things let loose, I mean, the action is some of the best action sequences that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to
there's
talk
a
I
about.
just I just want to
Yeah.
say one fun fact quick with when she was looking at a picture of her child on Earth that died. That's actually a picture of Sigourney Weaver's mother they used,
oh,
Just to
that's
make
kind
it
of
more
funny.
heartbreaking.
which
No,
is
and
kind of
I mean,
funny. But
but it does tie into that whole sense, and I mean that's a lot of what happens with this bond between Newt and Sigourney Weaver, and sort of like creating this family unit by the end of the film, and I think that might be why I disliked Alien
oh,
3 so much.
you're not alone in that. Don't worry.
Your
We'll
guys
get
Oh,
are
to that.
just
I
so
know,
eager.
We'll
but
we'll we'll burn that bridge when we get there. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
we'll have to
oh
hold
yeah,
you back. And
but
here's something that blew my mind. Like, they still manage, even with all of the high octane action and all of the breathtaking firefights. Like, the escape for the ventilation shaft is like one of the best scenes in the movie. The music adds so much to that scene. But my favorite scene was the turret sequence. Like, that is the epitome of perfect like horror of the mind. Like, hearing like the beeping sounds of the turrets running out of ammo, like it
Screaming
cuts
of the
right, yeah,
aliens.
screaming of the aliens
Yeah.
all around you, and the fact that like even when it's over, they're just like, oh, thank God, like the aliens are gone, but there's that sinking feeling of, oh no, the turrets are out of ammo. Like, what are we gonna do when they come
And
back? We're just totally screwed. Like, it nails
uh,
that's the perfect blend of action and horror in that one single sequence. I think that was trimmed down a bit in the theatrical cut too, but the director's cut just really, it happens two times. It just keeps going and stretches out like this rubber band of tension. And yeah, I think
Well,
the
and
director's cut is
this
better
was
for that
no,
and the
no, a
scene you
hundred
mentioned earlier,
percent.
Devin.
And I think it's interesting because, one of my complaints, and I didn't actually get to this when we were talking about Alien, but one of my complaints was that the ending with the airlock, it kind of felt a little cheesy. It
The
kind
whole
of felt
fact
like
that
it
she went
had.
back for the cat was kind of like,
No,
really?
no, I
oh yeah.
understand.
The
But in.
the one effect that really stands out for me in Alien that doesn't hold up is the plasma thing. That's clearly water that they were
Oh,
dripping
yeah.
with
Eh,
a backlight. And I
Yeah.
mean, it works. I mean, what else were you
it
gonna do at
works.
that point? But it was funny hearing Ridley Scott's kind of excuse for that. Like, I don't know what a plasma thing is, but but water just seems like the right thing to use
It
for
sounds
this.
cool,
I'm
yeah.
like, okay,
Well, no, but you compare that to like this with the like the airlock in this, and it rips apart the android, and there's these white guts going everywhere, and then she shows up in this mech suit. I mean, I can't imagine seeing this in theaters. Like this, this
oh,
is a film that deserves to be seen on a big screen. It's it's well made and masterful enough that you can get the same effect from seeing it at home. But I think if this
mhm.
came to my town, I would be like first in line to see this at like an anniversary showing.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
this is
Oh man.
and I remember people having, that comment. We talked about Dune earlier, where it's like, oh, you have to see this on a big screen. And I didn't get to the theaters in time. But I feel like a lot of people almost use that as a cop out nowadays. It's like,
Well,
I heard that about The Green Knight too, where it's like there's so much weight put on the spectacle. But this is not just the spectacle. This is all of these elements coming together in this
Mhm.
incredible, cohesive way that doesn't feel like. I mean, yes, it is a spectacle. Yes, it's action packed. Yes, it's high octane, but it's so well made. The characters aren't an afterthought. They're not tropey. They're not bland and blank like you might see in something like Dune or The Green Knight, unfortunately. But
mm,
this just, holy crap, this is everything you want and more. I mean, it's.
Yeah. No, and speaking of characters that could have been blank, one of the underrated like character arcs in this, or at least tying from like with the last film, was she has that really traumatizing experience with the android. Like they find out that they have like a robot on
yes.
board and he's trying to kill her, and there's that like pseudo rape scene where he tries to like stuff a porno down her throat or something because he doesn't have a dick. That's
Super weird,
Jesus
yeah.
no,
Christ.
no, that's exactly what Ridley Scott intentions
That
with
was
that scene was,
100% intentional.
and that was and it was funny hearing him in the commentary explaining that to Sigourney Weaver, and she's like, "Oh, I didn't realize the Freudian underpinnings of that." I feel kind of weird about that now, but
Yeah, yeah.
but no, it was really cool seeing Bishop in this film being an android, and when she like first recognizes she has that like PTSD moment, like you didn't tell me that there was an android on board, and then he tries to explain how, oh yeah, those older models are really twitchy for a reason.
And
It's
explains that
impossible
the
for
old
me to
model is always very
harm a
bit twitchy.
person, and she's still clearly traumatized, but he ends up just through doing the right thing and acting the way he's supposed to throughout the film, proving to her that he is, you know, better than the last android that she encountered with, and he
Well,
is
it's
the
almost
right
like
person.
she.
Yeah.
It's almost like she's bigoted against androids, which
Well,
kind of.
no,
It makes sense.
it's 100% justified in her case because her experience with
Well,
an
no, it
android
is.
was she was literally almost killed and raped by one. So it's
Well,
100%
yeah.
understandable. But Bishop proved himself to be not that, and he ended up being very helpful. And I love that subversion of the expectation where you kind of expected him to betray her at the end, and then he does, but then he comes back because he couldn't be on the platform. So that was like a little bit of a one-two punch. And
Yeah.
even after him getting torn in half, he saves Newt from not going into the air vent. So
Oh yeah, I mean that again is like, I mean, subversion is kind of,
Some almost like James
almost.
Cameron would use that in a certain sequel.
Ooh.
No
Well,
spoilers.
I mean, the thing about subversion in terms of like film criticism and commentary. I mean, we hear about subversion almost as like an in joke or like a meme. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, what a
Subvert your
twist, or
wow,
expectations.
what a twist! They didn't do the thing I thought they would.
yeah, or I mean, the sort of Ryan Johnson kind of thing. But I mean, this this does subversion, but
And
it
has a
makes
narrative
sense.
purpose.
It has a narrative purpose. Not only does it have a narrative purpose, but it makes sense.
Hmm.
It's not just that they're doing it because they can, but they're doing it to serve a purpose, and it makes sense that that could be a possibility. It's not coming completely out of thin air. Um, I mean, we've talked about the performance. My God, Bill Paxton is incredible. Sigourney Weaver. I love the actor who plays this like sleazy,
Yes.
Wayland Yutiny.
Even his character, like it's such a common cliche to have that kind of sleazeball coward that kind of
Oh
backstabs
yeah,
everybody else in
Oh
the end.
yeah.
But he's just such a perfect that character that I can't be mad
no,
at it.
he
Like he's
is.
so perfectly
I
cast.
I love that pathetic little yelp he makes right before the alien kills him. It was so
Yeah,
satisfying.
Yeah, it's like
but
get him.
that might be my only. That might be my only nitpick. Is I really wanted to see what happened to him. I mean,
Well,
It's
yeah, I
implied.
mean, it shows like him reacting and then the alien coming in and there's just the sound effect. But your imagination can do wonders with that.
Yeah,
That's
oh
he got
yeah,
penetrated.
that's some tasty Schadenfreude right there.
and I mean, another thing that I love about this film is, for the amount of cast that we have in this film, and the, amount of characters, um, each one of them gets their own moment, which is weird because, you think about films like this, you think about how that, like, almost like so many of these films will set up a big cast of characters and then they're not really defined. I mean, not just in the sense of like their personalities, but like we don't get enough screen time with them, Like this gives each of those characters just enough screen time. We know who they are. They each get their moment. I think about Gorman, who's introduced as this like cowardly sort of, rookie, uh, you know, uh, officer who's kind of commanding the troops, and you think, oh my God, how can he do this? How is he, how is he? I'm sorry, I'm reading the Discord chat now, but no,
Guys,
you're
stop it.
thinking, how is he going to, you can't believe that he got them into this mess. And then, towards the end, he gets to sacrifice himself. He gets to have that moment.
You're such an
And it
asshole,
makes you,
sir.
yeah, no, it makes so much sense, and it subverts your expectations, and it makes you feel that much more attachment to these characters, where I think a lot of films would take the easy way out, and it's just like, they're dispensable alien food. And maybe they have their own personality, but they're just kind of unceremoniously killed off screen because it's edgy or whatever. It feels so well earned.
Yeah. I also want to go back to so I was getting to a point about Bishop kind of being fulfilling the character arc of the android in the last film, showing that androids aren't just these malicious kind of people. They can be a good asset when you're in dire straits. But also it shows a lot of strength on Ripley's part, the show the growth that she's able to overcome the trauma that she experienced and you know face against this threat and save Newt and work together with Bishop, who is a person that she has every right to be terrified of. And I
I,
think that coming together is just so beautiful and cathartic, and that's why when
so
she when she suits up in that in that machine and says, "Get away from her, you bitch." everybody, in the theater would go crazy over that line, and it's such a cathartic
I
line.
think it does pass the Bechdel test as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
Hey, it
Okay,
actually
but
does. Yeah.
I did kind of ramble there on my last point, and I apologize. Someone was making fun of me in the chat for my pronunciation of Wayland Utiny. So
I think it's Wayland Utani, I think is how they put
yeah,
it.
it's
But
Wayland
anyway,
Utani.
did they say that in the? I don't know.
Yeah, it's Wayland
it's a
Utani.
fictional organization, so
You know what I'm talking about.
Tomato, Arkansas.
Speaking of which, the anti-capitalist themes are back at full force. Like the idea of
Oh, yeah.
wanting to preserve these aliens and bring them back is referenced yet again. Even like my friend Matt mentioned in the comment section. Speaking of the comment section, just the horrifying reality of the main character trying to explain this situation to business heads, just treating it like another day at the office. It's like, all right, we're gonna take these off your funds. It's gonna be a minor setback for us, so consider yourself lucky. Like, they're just so casual and calm about it that it's kind of a trope nowadays in movies, but it's like you said with Alien, Steven, where this film is so influential and so referenced to pop culture and so alluded to that it's just left such an impact in society that you can't even blame it if it is derivative in certain elements, because it made those derivative elements a reality.
No, 100%. Yeah, I agree. What else can we say? I mean, my God, this is the best action movie I've ever seen.
I have nitpicks, but I don't know if you guys want to hear them or not.
I don't.
Well, there you go. Just a couple
Wait,
things. Like, do you think it's kind of weird that the scene where it's like, okay, you can't use these kinds of bullets because it could blow up the reactor, so they dump out the magazines in the middle of the alien nest? Why don't you go back to the recon vehicle and then dump out your magazines? Why'd you have to swap your magazines in the middle of dangerous enemy territory?
They're not swapping.
You know what?
They're taking out their magazines.
In a bag.
But yeah, they're putting it all in a bag, but that still takes time.
I knew that this would come up, because it always does, and I applaud you for it. Always fun thing to gripe about. But I remember thinking, oh, there's going to be a possible nitpick moment coming up here when she first encounters the alien queen, which we haven't talked about how much of a
Stan
awesome
motherfucking Winston
feat that is. Stan
my
Winston.
boy.
Also, that was something that James Cameron himself conceived of, apart from H.R. Giger. He was thinking about calling him up initially, or he was thinking retroactively, maybe I should have worked with him, but he found out, or he heard that he's very difficult to work with, and it was his own ego as a director that he said, well, I only need one more creature than what he already had, and I kind of want to do my own thing with it, and I have a pretty good idea in mind. But I thought they did an absolutely excellent job designing that creature. She is such a
gorgeous
she's just a force to be reckoned with. Bitch is the most apt descriptor for her. But
she's one crazy bitch.
It was when she was she already threatened her with the flamethrower, and as she's walking away, she could. I was thinking, oh, she could just walk away from this. Like, why did she start burning them up if that's going to cause more trouble? But it's because she noticed that one of the A's were hatching, and then there was an alien creature on the wall. She just kind of gives her this oh, you fucked up, and then she starts shooting up and lighting it all on fire. So yeah, that was a would-be nitpick turned out to be totally justified with a reaction shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that didn't bug me at all. And it's they even the fact that she goes back, it's like, okay, at least she's going back for a character we've grown emotionally attached to, and she's grown emotionally attached to. The child actor isn't the best in the world, but doesn't really need to be, because she's shocked and traumatized, so she doesn't really need to emote all that much beyond just screaming for help. So it didn't bother me
I thought she
much.
did a perfectly fine job in this, and it was
she
very
was
believable.
Good enough. Yeah.
I think James Cameron did a good job directing her to make her look traumatized without actually traumatizing her. In that one close-up shot of her where she has dirt in her face and Ripley's wiping the dirt off
that to so
connect with her. That's a beautiful moment between them. And she, in order to stop her from looking into Ripley's eyes, because she's supposed to be off into space, he basically just put a dot on the wall and told her to just look at that. And
Well, I
that's
mean,
all you
I
have to
thought
do.
I thought she gave a great performance. I mean, for the
Yeah.
part that she was playing, and especially
Yeah,
in
for the part,
context of
yeah.
her age. I mean, I will say this: the scene where Newt, this little 10-year-old girl, is in the water of this sort of underground
Yes.
ventilation system, and
that's the best shot in the movie.
we see it before she does, and she turns around and there's this giant alien just towering over her.
You're missing important detail. We see the tail come out,
Oh,
and that
yeah.
is like the perfect build up to its reveal. Because it just
It-
highlights how big it is, or it's just like it's that sense of scale that something like Jurassic Park nailed, where it's like, wow, like that's just its tail. Like imagine the full creature. Like it leaves enough to the imagination.
it's one of the most horrifying shots I've seen in
I
a
agree.
movie. I mean, for a movie that is marketed as an action movie and as like extreme and high octane, that is a genuinely terrifying horror moment.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. I took a screenshot of that and shared it in the thing when I was watching it, just because like that's still an iconic shot, and I love the little bit of catchlight that she has in her eye. Even like it's such a
Yeah.
beautifully framed image, and it's iconic for a reason. And
Oh,
I thought she did a terrific job, even though the actress that played her didn't pursue acting as a career afterwards.
I'm kind of
I still
disappointed
thought
by
that that was
yeah.
a very memorable performance of hers. I kind of want to see her come back into a like TK Kwan in
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, come on.
But
Everything Everywhere All at
I'm not.
Once
I'm not.
too. Make it
We,
make
we,
her.
we will get to that film. That I was just gonna mention that that's another film that feels like a theater experience, and it feels like, yeah. I don't want to spoil too much about that. We'll get to it. That's all I'll say. Um,
Anyways,
man,
not much else to add. The funny thing is, I've seen this more than the original Alien, despite the fact that I like Alien more. Because Alien, it's one of my favorite movies of all time, but I'm well aware it's kind of like a slow burn horror movie, so it's not quite for everybody. No, this film is absolutely for everybody. You can watch it in just about any mood. It's fantastic, one of the best action movies ever made, and it's
And
one
I'm
of the few
giving
movies that blends action horror very well, and I'm giving it a 9.3 out of 10.
I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10.
Ooh boy.
nice. What? Why a 9.3, Ian?
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
why?
because I'm stuck between a 9 and a 9.5, so fuck it, 9.3.
Oh,
I mean, it's what I gave the original Jurassic Park.
I mean, okay.
I mean, come on,
okay.
it's higher than a 9.
Nine-
9.3 is an excellent
9.6.
score.
I'm gonna make
9.3.
Daryl happy and give this a 9.6.
Yay!
I only, yeah, I only docked the points because it's working off of what Ridley Scott and Dan Bannon and those guys had established. But man, what a hell of a follow-up sequel. This is definitely the more rewatchable of the two. I mean, I've rewatched both of them quite a bit over the years, but you really have to be in a certain mood to fully sit in and appreciate the first one. Where this one, it's a little more accessible, but it has those heartfelt moments. And this is something that if I had kids growing up, I'd watch. I'd show them this. As scary as it is. I think when you have like a child insert character, it makes it more accessible in that way. I don't know what it is, but
Oh, 100%.
Oh, that's true. That's a
yeah.
big reason why, allude to Jurassic Park being so relatable because of those child characters that you could just attach yourself to at a young age. All right, going from
and I only docked a point just because of all the films that have derivatively tried to copy this. I'm thinking of fucking Pandorum and Prometheus,
yeah,
which is not an official Alien film. It's a
it
clear,
doesn't
deliberate
exist.
knockoff.
Yeah,
Well,
just
it
a
is
very
made
expensive
by
fan
Ripley
fiction.
Scott. I think it's kind of a reimagining of the world or something. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Sure.
But
Well,
it can't
we'll
be
get to
any
it when we get
worse
to it.
than the next film.
Yeah,
That'll be Xenomorphin 2 when we look at the other Alien movies that
all right.
that shouldn't exist but do.
But we have to deal with them anyways. Going from one shit show to another, Alien Free, or as I like to call it, the perfect documentary on why you should never make a film for Fox. It took 4 years for them to accept a script for this, including versions of a script that included a wooden planet with a wooden satellite and monks. A version of the script where Hicks and... Sorry, is it Hicks? Michael Biehn's character? I keep getting his name mixed up.
Yes,
Yeah,
the Hicks
Hicks.
was Michael Biehn.
Yeah, sorry, Hicks and Lance Henriksen, Bishop, survive, and there's a version of the script that's basically like body horror and very bloody. There's a version that Steven mentioned. Took him 4 years to finally get down to a nitty gritty script, and it wasn't even finished yet. And we'll get to that. So this is Alien Free. Ripley is sent to a prison planet where Newt and Hicks are both killed off screen. Bishop is kind of torn in half, and it crash lands onto this prison planet full of bald British people that have about as much personality as you'd expect. And it's basically about Ripley, coming to terms with her situation, dealing with a new alien threat, coming to terms with the loss of her loved ones, and the fact that there's now a new alien, an alien queen brewing inside of her. I watched this film once before, and now I watched the editor's cut because David Fincher refuses to believe that there's a version of this film that he could call his own at this point. There were so many rewrites, so many reshoots, and the studio was just angry and pissed off with David Fincher the whole time because he's a perfectionist and they actually wanted to get shit done. And I watched the editor's cut this time, and I could probably say I hate this fucking movie. I fucking hate this movie. This might be one of the worst movies we've talked about. Last Jedi. People said Last Jedi was the most insulting film ever made. Fuck you. Give me a handwritten apology because this film is the most insulting franchise film I've ever seen. I was so angry at this film.
Thank God.
It was one of the.
This is
so. I couldn't believe some of the writing choices. It looks like shit. It feels like shit. It makes you feel shit. I fucking hated this film. This might be worse than.
I guess I have to come into defense of this because I know both of you hate this thing, which.
Really?
I will agree. The whole approach and direction of this, the fact the studio wanted to cash in on a third movie, so that whole approach to this is guaranteed. This should be misfire from the start. Like this is starting from the wrong place.
Oh, for sure.
And that is absolutely a fatal flaw of this thing, unquestionable. I have to say, the opening credits are an art piece in and of itself. So it's almost a microcosm for
good music.
What the studio is doing here. Where hey, all those characters that you grew to love in the last film that was so successful, fuck you, they're all dead. And it's shown in such a beautiful, nihilistic, hard cut way. It's just like this slow atmosphere you're familiar with, and then it just hard cut shows, oh, there's an alien egg on ship. Oh, this facehugger is going up on Newt's thing. And hey, everyone's dead, and Hicks is all disfigured, and that's how the movie starts out. It reminds me of the end of Evangelion, the way that movie starts out.
Except that movie isn't actually.
I'm gonna stop you here because here's the thing: the studio...
I'm not saying this is good. I'm saying it's very evident of what this film is.
It perfectly establishes the tone, and the tone is shit.
I don't think this film knows what it is.
Oh no!
Here's the thing:
it's so imbalanced in its tone.
Fincher says the studio didn't trust him enough. They wanted to compromise his vision. The studio says they were dealing with a cocky, arrogant, hotshot tyrant who wouldn't.
Which they wanted. They hired him for that reason.
They hired him because they thought he could rush through the project. Their words.
They hired him because up until that point he had done a bunch of Madonna music videos, and they thought he was competent enough and they could push him around enough. Here's the thing. This movie, and I'm going to take objection to the fact that David Fincher has disowned this thing, because here's the thing, like, this has David Fincher written all over it. There is so much of this that feels like bad parody of what people talk about when they talk about David Fincher.
It feels like he just hasn't honed in on the style yet. Like, it feels like it's just edgy for the sake of it.
This is like what people... This is like what people talk about when they talk about Quentin Tarantino in Death Proof, or like they talk about I'm drawing a blank here, but like a movie that exists solely to just jerk off the director because he's indulging his worst tendencies.
Well, here's the thing. This is a film that the studio wanted to push and wanted to get made, and David Fincher wanted to do a feature film project just to get out there. I think like he got on the radar because he did this commercial for Apple and it was cinematic. And David Fincher was pretty young at this time. I think he was like not even 30 years old yet.
Yeah,
Um,
20s.
and yeah, man. And of course he's gonna say yes to doing an Alien film, thinking
Yeah.
where he is in his career at this point, because he wants to get these kind of big budgets, and he wants to do it art. And you can see notes of him having some artistic flair and having some sense of direction here, and him trying to stamp a vision. Like there's a noble effort and attempt here, but there's absolutely and arguably like a lot of tension from the studios trying to push and pull it to be something else. And he again he's fighting for it to be something and it just wasn't working, and that's why I think he properly disowns this thing, because it is a absolute hot mess of a film. But I do like appreciating the efforts here at the very least to try to make something
I
interesting.
I don't. I think it would have been better if David Fincher had just walked off set and told them to figure it out on
I
their
mean,
own.
that's basically
This
what
is an
happened. When it got
absolute
to the editing process, that's basically what
abomination
happened.
of a film. Kind of going off what Ian was talking about. Yes, there was a version of this film where Michael Biehn would come over and kind of take over the mantle from Ripley, and we were going to have this kind of like Cold War allegory, and that would have been cool. There was a version of this film that was drawn up by Eric Red, one of my favorite writers, who did Near Dark, which also starred Bill Paxton around this time. Eric Red kind of envisioned this like prison planet. There was this like art house wooden planet thing, which I think was the way that I read it. It almost sounded like an A24 kind of
Which
script.
a
It was
lot of
like
people think like that's the legit Alien Free. Like there's
it
even
was
an
very like
audiobook of it with
the wood.
Michael
Like
Biehn
there was
and yeah,
this
Lance
yeah,
Henriksen.
no, there was like a cult of this wooden satellite, and it was going to be very art house, and the studio was like, we can't do anything with this. This is too, this doesn't have
Too out there.
commercial viability. And so the studio basically came in and they were like, well, okay, let's take all of these ideas, jam them together into a somewhat finished script.
Yeah. Here's
Also,
the thing about David Fincher too. Like there's an article I read in the Silver City magazine where they asked directors like how many takes should a scene take normally, and most directors gave like 5 to 20 takes. Like that's the range of how many takes they should take to shoot a scene. What's David Fincher's answer? 142. He is not like a quick be there and done director. Likes to take his
I
time.
mean,
He
I
likes to make
think a
shots as
lot of
perfect as
that,
possible. Like and
honestly,
studios didn't like that.
Okay.
They just wanted to rush him out the door.
I don't know
This
how
is
much.
my argument for this film. It's not really for the film itself. Like the end product of the film, it's a shit show. There are some cool elements in it, and I can see where he's trying to make something interesting of this. But I see this the way I see David Lynch's adaptation of Dune in his filmography. This was like a necessary big budget failure for him to try to take on, and to help him define and realize the type of films he wants to make. Because by taking on this project and for it to go wrong in all the ways that he didn't want it to, I think he would come back and better define, okay, these are the type of films that I want to do, that I want to hone in on. Like this was him trying to do a franchise film, and he found out afterwards or in the process that franchise films is not what he wants to do. I'm going to make my own kind of smaller budget thrillers, and then we get films like Seven and Fight Club. And so I feel like this film was like a necessary failure for him to start his career with,
For sure.
because that helped him define the type of films that he would be better at making. And it was the same thing with David Lynch and Dune. Like that film was such an overly ambitious project that he was hired onto, that he realized that maybe he wasn't the right director for, but he wanted to get you know his hands
Here's
into a project with that kind of scale. And since then, he defined himself better as a director with the type of films he wants to make. So
well,
that's how that's the value that I would argue for this film.
here's the thing. I'm not a fan of any director that does that kind of like Stanley Kubrick thing where they're like, we have to shoot 500 shots or whatever. Like, I think a lot of that is just kind of pretentious wank. But here's the thing. It's like David Fincher, yes, he made Girl, which two of those are some of my favorite films of all time, or at least in the case of Gone Girl, probably one of my favorite films of the last decade. He made Zodiac, which I was not as crazy about as everyone else was. Zodiac to me was like what you guys criticized Michael Mann's Manhunter for. It feels like a very well polished, elevated crime procedural that you would see on late night TV.
I
And,
don't. Yeah.
you know,
I still enjoyed that film.
no, I mean, it's okay. But, like, the thing that I guess I'm getting at is David Fincher is so much more cut out for those kind of dark, atmospheric thrillers.
Yeah.
Nihilistic
And
movies, yeah.
yeah, they're almost like, I mean, I don't want to say low budget. That's not the word I'm looking for, but small scale.
Yeah.
You know,
Kind of like a
you're
student
not
film in
out
heart.
in the
Yeah.
you're not in the confines of space and this vast, abyss of, all these kind of like high concept things. And that's fine. I understand that that may not be his forte. And I understand that there was studio interference, and I understand that the studio thought there was, David Fincher interference. So what I tried to do when I was watching this film and when I was writing the review or my thoughts on this, I had to think in terms of, let's take Ripley out of this. Okay, just imagine this is a directorial debut. It has no connection whatsoever to any of the previous Alien films. Okay,
Yeah.
let's just pretend for a moment that Ellen Ripley is not Ellen Ripley. She's just generic space woman, and she washes up on this, prison planet of monks. Which, by the way, there's a there's a scene where it's revealed that on this prison, maximum security prison planet, they don't have any guns, which is
I
a
have a
requirement.
reason for that. Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
requirement
Sigourney
because
Weaver was
yeah.
very anti-gun,
Yep.
and very strong sort of regulations politically on firearms. So that was kind of her contribution to the film.
She was also a producer, so
Yes. So, okay, all of those things aside, it's like if I'm looking at this film as just a, like you said, student film, kind of like A24 sort of director debut, would I still enjoy it?
no.
The answer is no.
No, I wouldn't
It is-
either.
That's because it's not what it is. This is
No,
a
no, no,
studio
I mean, but
hodgepodging of a couple half-baked script ideas together and getting a director
no,
to
no, and
sign on. And he takes the job
understand.
because he wants to get into feature films.
Yeah.
Like, this was
No,
a
I
necessary
understand
failure
that,
for
but
him
what
to
I'm
take
saying,
on.
okay, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, even if this wasn't a giant slap in the face to everything that I loved about the last two films, I'm saying if this was a completely unrelated project, I would still hate this film
I'm
because
with you.
it is
Yeah.
ugly. It looks like shit. None of these characters have any personality.
Yes.
We talked about
Thank you.
we talked about the last two films where every single character is like summed up in a couple of seconds, a couple of lines, and they have their own like defining moment and their death means something. This is like a step backwards in the worst possible way,
Huge.
where not only do I not know who any of these people getting killed are half the time, I don't care who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much openly established throughout several times during the film's runtime that all of these characters are murderers or rapists. And I'm like, why do I care if they're getting picked off?
Well, here's the thing. Like, that's such a great place for drama. That's such a great place for character development. Like, maybe some of them were thrown away for the wrong reason. Maybe some of them, are trying to condone for their crimes for religion, which is touched on, but they don't really go anywhere with any of those ideas. We haven't even talked about the fact that they're all bald and all British, and there were several scenes where I said to my mom, I was watching with her, I don't know who's who. I legitimately don't know who's who. Like, that's
there's even a moment where they're like, okay, but like, what is this religion that you guys worship? And it's like, it's just some Christian fundamentalist thing.
I feel like there was like something there, like it's satirizing religion and how like these terrible people try to use religion to justify their actions, but it doesn't go anywhere with that. It
Well,
doesn't have
and here's
anything.
the
I don't know
thing.
what they're trying to say about religion. Just the fact that they're insisting that they're talking about it. Okay, like
It's
that's not
like
enough.
this is like edgy fan fiction. This feels like a
Yes.
14-year-old who thought this was deep,
Yeah.
tried to
Which
cobble something together. Which, here's the thing. I mean, when
you can't necessarily blame David Fincher for it because he didn't write the thing.
Yeah,
He didn't
exactly.
direct
Gotta
it.
keep in mind this is somebody else's script that was also
he
rewritten.
did rewrite large portions of this,
There
and
were
there are
other people
serious.
who rewrote it too, though.
I
You
understand
can
that
only
there was
do
like
so much
over.
when you're trying to polish a turd.
Well, I understand that, but
That's
you know, he did do extensive rewrites, and I understand there's like 10 different writers on this thing by the time it's all said and done. But at the same time, it's like I don't know. I mean, that you open the film with the Newt, the character that we all love, and they make a point to deliberately like bring out this huge knife and cut open her chest, and
Yeah,
it's
what the
so
fuck was that? Why
mean
was that
spirited.
necessary?
Like,
Yeah.
stop! She's already dead.
Literally. Oh, and better yet,
Yeah.
that's when we get our lovely, like, head honcho and his dumb assistant who is just like, oh, he's not stepping in place right, he's not saying things right, he's an idiot, get it? And I'm like, are we cracking jokes during this brutal child autopsy? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Why are you
I
doing
also
that?
want to. I also want to bring up the fact that they make a point to cut open the dead child as awful and as cold and nihilistic
It's
as
trying
possible.
way too hard.
But they no. But they do that in the first 10 minutes because they're afraid that her corpse is harboring this alien. And then, like, not even 20 minutes later into the film, they suspect that Ripley has an alien in her, and they just do a med scan?
Yeah.
Why couldn't you do that?
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, it's so... something people don't talk about, which I'm surprised about, is that what made Aliens such a great sequel is that you don't even need to watch the first Alien to enjoy it. You get attached to all these new characters, all these new Marines. You get attached to Newt. You can see it with a set of fresh eyes and still care about what's going on. This film is so reliant on your nostalgia for Aliens and everything Ripley has gone through that if you haven't seen either of those films before, you just get no enjoyment out of this. You're just like, wait, who is this child? Why are they doing this brutal autopsy on her? Who the heck is this AI guy? Why do they know each other? Like, I don't know. Like, it's so dependent on your nostalgia from those two films that it just doesn't work as its own piece.
Well, and it would be fine if it was relying on your nostalgia, but for it to rely solely on an audience of people who have nostalgia for the first two, and then to deliberately spit in the face of them at the same time, it's so bizarre. It is so pointlessly mean-spirited. I mean, the thing that also bugged me, and I mean, it's always like the little things. I know we're talking about nitpicks, that you had.
Oh,
they say several times throughout this film that there are 25 prisoners on this planet.
Yes.
But there's also a scene where, at the point of this scene coming up, 5 people have already died. Okay?
Yeah.
So 5 people have already died on screen. 10 people die, according to one of the characters. And there's 11 left. Like,
yeah.
There's
now, I can see conceptually that they were trying to start off. Well, it's like they want just Ripley to be the only one alive, which is kind of how Aliens started. But it undoes everything that Aliens has built up.
No, I'm just saying this film can't keep its story straight. And again, I understand there's studio interference and 10 different cooks in the kitchen, but it's like you would think that the minor sort of just like Passover on the script would figure out that you're telling me, multiple times, this is how many people are on this planet, and you have exceeded that amount by killing them, and now you still have a greater amount left. I mean, I know we're nitpicking, but this film deserves it.
Hey.
This is the most corporate, cash grab, soulless,
boring.
This feels like a film that would be financed by Wayland Yutani. This is
no, exactly. Like, it is funny how like the first two films are so critical of the corporate interference, and then the third one is such a product of it.
I,
Yeah, I know.
the acting is horrendous.
I
I mean,
acting's like the one
Sigourney.
okay thing about it. I think
I
she was still
disagree.
good.
I
I
think
think she was still
Sigourney
good.
Weaver wishes she could be anywhere else but on this fucking
I
set.
got
Well,
that
here's the thing.
vibe, but I also thought
She
tried
could
her
have
best. Yeah.
she could have phoned this in, but the fact that she gave it her all, despite the fact that it was a shit show, and she was
I
also a
don't
producer
know
on
that
it.
she's
No,
giving it her all. So many of her
She
line
is.
deliveries are like she's whispering and it's mumbly and it's
That's
like
just
really
the bad sound
trying.
ending.
She's really trying to make this work, and I give her credit for that.
Yeah, I
I
think the acting is the
don't-
one okay thing about this movie, but what they have to work with is pretty horrendous. In fairness, they have absolutely nothing to work with. We talk about the characters being really bland, and it takes itself so seriously at points. But then, like I said, there's like the head honcho who literally has a dumb sidekick, like a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon. Like that element was so goofy. Like, are we leaning into dark humor now? Like the film just has no idea what it wants to be. Does it want to be like the first Alien movie, where it's like this, slow burn, single alien creature, single survivor story once again? Does it want to be like its own nihilistic take on like religion and anti-corporatism, or does it want to be like kind of like Aliens, like this ragtag group of weirdos like getting together to stop a threat? Like I don't know. Like it doesn't know what it wants to be. It does feel like there's 10 cooks in a kitchen. Like even if you didn't know about the behind the scenes, you could just watch it and feel like something's wrong. Like something just feels wrong. Something's up with this project. Even if you didn't know anything about the behind the scenes, something is just iffy. And the alien, holy shit!
No,
I know.
that was
Yeah,
definitely
let's talk
the
about
feeling
it.
that I had going through these when I was younger. The first two I definitely rewatched more than the third one and the fourth one, which we'll get into. We're chatting a little bit in the chat about Matrix Resurrections. Sorry, Alien Resurrections. But it's funny the Matrix takes the same title. Uh, there's some funny parallels there. But no, like you can definitely tell that there's something off here. And oh, there was a point I was getting to. I'm just getting distracted by the
gonna be
chat.
honest. This is a film that I struggled to think of one positive thing to say about it, honestly.
The acting.
There is one thread here that doesn't make any sense to me. Why is she being coy about what happened to Newton? What she's suspicious? Like, she says we gotta do an autopsy on Newton. I need to be sure how she died, and she doesn't explain why, and she holds off on explaining.
Yeah.
Like she was so gung ho adamant to expose this alien creature because it was such a direct visceral threat to her, and she was wanting to make sure that everybody knew about it, and then she's suddenly being coy about sharing
Why
that
is
information
this the
suddenly.
third
That makes
film?
no sense.
Why is this the third film in a row where people are doubting her? Like, has she not proved herself by now?
Well, this is like an isolated prison planet. Like they have no idea what an alien is. Or...
I mean, but
yeah,
also,
but yeah,
I mean,
that element was
in
so stupid. And there's another scene in the movie, if we're gonna nitpick it, where characters just act in stupid ways to build tension and to for the sake of the structure of the movie and nothing else. Where like she has the baby inside of her and she made a deal with the preacher to kill her as soon as they kill the alien, and she's like, hey, stay here, I want to die with the alien as it gets buried in lead. He's like, no, we had a deal, you gotta go up the ladder and I'll kill myself. I'm like, what? But you said you'd kill her after the alien was dead. You think the lead will kill the alien, therefore the alien will die with her, which isn't the perfect plan. Like, she gets what she wants. Why do you think the lead won't kill her? Do you have a copy of the script? Do you somehow see the plot ahead of you? Like, what are you doing? That makes no sense. It's so stupid because they just set up her epic sacrifice at the end of the movie.
We had to get to the Jesus symbolism
Oh,
of her falling
fuck.
the vat of lava.
Why did that guy go after the soldiers? They have guns. Why do you think like, oh fuck you, I'm gonna beat you with a pipe?
I love the Mondo poster for Alien 3 where it shows just her like it's like the cover of Radiohead's The Bends, of that one, dummy.
Yeah.
It makes it look like actual art. It's honestly impressive the way they were able to pull that through. And
Also,
I feel like the opening of this film and the ending of this film was very apt for what should have happened to the rest of the franchise. It should have died here.
Jesus
did
You know
Christ.
what I
anyone
mean?
also notice that the Dylan, I think is his name, the black guy who is a
Preacher.
self-proclaimed rapist murderer, but he's also a pastor, I guess, for some reason. Did anyone notice that he says?
I mean, that
in
just seems
one
very
scene-
fitting, doesn't it? Sorry.
Well,
Go on.
no, it's funny, but it is funny because he says throughout the course of the film, like there's one moment where he says, "Okay, well, we can't trust that guy. He's an idiot. We got to trust her. She seems to know what she's doing."
What
And then
justifies
it's
that?
literally not even 5 minutes later, the next scene, he's talking to someone else, and he's like, "Why should we trust her? You just suggested her to
You
take
just
over."
suggested her to talk, and yeah, if we're gonna go off of plot holes, there's a scene where it's like, the dumb sidekick character gets called 85. It's like, stop calling me 85, stop calling me this, and she's like, well, why doesn't he like being called 85? And he's like, well, that's because that's his IQ rating, and he doesn't like to be reminded that he's stupid. It's like, okay, 85 is not below average. It's a low average, but it's not below average. Below average is like below 70. And it's like, okay, you're slightly less intelligent, but it's not like mentally handicapped. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna bully you like a bunch of 5-year-olds to you should be offended by it. That was like another weird thing that bugged me, and another weird
Well, I
oversight.
mean,
Like, you
yeah,
couldn't just
average.
Google, like, you couldn't just look up in a book like IQ ratings or something like
No,
that. You
I
want to
mean,
do any
average.
research for
They
your
don't
movie?
have Google
Pretty
in the
much.
future,
Okay,
Ian,
well, that's
because
why I
they
said
didn't
red.
have
I said
Google in the
red. That
past,
fixed
and
it.
they couldn't.
Yeah, average IQ is between 85 and 115, so
Yeah.
he's actually on the lower side
Yeah,
of
also these prisoners somehow have that IQ. I don't think so. And the music, the opening music is so good. Like, that's one of the few positive things I can find about this movie. The rest of the soundtrack is fucking awful. That rock music that plays while Ripley is like almost getting raped.
Oh,
What the hell
God.
was that?
No,
What was that?
yeah, that really stood out. That was almost as abrupt as Ramstein and Nymphomaniac.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
fought that. Yeah.
I totally forgot to talk about the soundtrack in the last movie. I'm just gonna say this quick. Um, they were using like synthesizers like early on this Fairlight system, which was like an early digital sampler where it was literally like a computer-based system where they had samples. This was also how they created the soundtrack for Terminator 2. And there's some interesting facts there. But the people that had it, this wasn't like industry standard at the time. The composers literally had it in their living room in their house, and they were creating sound effects and synthesizer noises in their living room for it. And they were saying it was like making a home movie. Um, and then I think they did a pretty good job with the score here. I think the score and the cinematography are two positive things about this film, if anything.
I
The
I
score,
disagree. I
especially.
think the cinematography looks like shit.
Well, the cinematography
mean-
is fine, but the visual effects of the alien. Okay, I gotta talk about the
They were
alien real
deliberately
quick,
going.
please.
They were really deliberately trying to go home back to the original Alien in terms of the look of it.
Yeah,
No,
well,
Although
here's the thing.
it looks like they took
they had
dirt and
hired
smeared it on
the
the lens. This is so brown and ugly. I
well
didn't get
no
that from
actually
the
that's
first two.
literally that was literally something they did in the last sequence. In the last sequence, they were trying to get this wide shot of her gonna hop into the lava, but the scaffolding everything was too visible in the shot. So David Fincher literally just smudged grease on the lens so that it would look like a vat of lava and not like scaffolding with lights.
Ooh.
That's literally so that's yeah, you're not wrong.
Also,
Wow.
the alien. So it was originally going to be a cow in an alien suit, and they couldn't get the animal to cooperate. Then the studio forced them to rewrite it as a dog, and the editor's cut, it's still the bull, but in the director's cut, they make a dog turn to the alien. And so they tried to put a dog in an alien suit, and the dog also didn't cooperate. So they were like, I've got a great idea. Let's put a CGI, a sock puppet, into the scenery, and it will look perfect. Yeah, it looks 10 times smaller than the other alien. It literally looks green at times, and all of the tension is taken away because it's just running in like open light, and the lighting doesn't help
Yeah,
it
it
at
was
all.
really
It's not
early, like
scary.
it was really early
It
CGI,
looks
and
like
it shows.
shit.
I mean,
Terminator
it's
2
neat
came out
to
the
kind of
same.
see that
Terminator 2
process,
came out a
but
year beforehand, and the CGI in that looks way better.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what a fucking mess. I have nothing else to say about this disastrous piece of shit. The Last Jedi is no longer the most insulting franchise film, and this might just be the worst Alien film in the franchise, which is saying something because there's 3 other
This
Alien
might
films
be
that didn't
one of the
exist.
worst films I've ever seen.
This
This
might be
is
the worst
that
film I've
bad.
talked about on the podcast.
Wait till you see Alien Resurrections.
That film I like better. I actually unironically
Actually,
like that film better. The underwater sequence in that is unironically great.
okay, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've come back to it. It's different.
I
I'll
Yeah,
say
no,
that.
I
Daryl, I
haven't
won't stop.
seen
It's better than Alien 3.
Resurrection. I cannot imagine anything being more insulting
It's
than
less
this.
boring.
This is one of the, especially coming off of Aliens, which I absolutely loved. This is like a giant middle finger. I truly hate this film. So I cannot think of a positive thing to say.
What's your rating, Steven?
Oh, I'm gonna give this. Can I give this a negative rating? My God,
Yeah,
this
hey,
is.
Devon did that for King Kong versus Godzilla, so go for it.
Yeah, -10. This is horrendous.
I'm not gonna go that
below
low.
a 0.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go that low. Pathfinder was slightly worse because it's more boring, and I don't know what the excuse was for that film. Lots of people love this movie, by the way. Lots of people genuinely think like it's a misunderstood masterpiece, and not to discredit your opinions, guys, but I'm just trying to understand it. So I was really hoping one of you guys would just love it, so I could see what I was missing.
I have a lukewarm feeling of it. Like I don't think it's amazing.
How comfortable is the fence you're sitting on right now, as you always say?
I'm starting to feel like a little bit of soreness on the one side. It's a bit there's definitely a lack of circulation going on here, so I'm not doing that great. But it's getting kind of numb. So like the 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 pain is mostly over, but I'm still not feeling good.
2 out of 10 for me. 2 out of 10. Fuck this movie. I don't know whose fault it is.
I'm gonna go a little higher. I'm gonna give it a 3.4.
Hey, half of a 6.9. Nice.
Yeah.
I really wanted to love this movie, but I couldn't handle it. Like halfway through the movie, I was just like, if I wasn't watching this for the podcast, I would have turned off by now. Like I couldn't handle it, man.
I mean, even as a kid, this is not one that I revisited often. I definitely saw the other two a lot more. Like I had all 4 of them on VHS, including the 4th one, and this was definitely one of the ones I came back to the least. The second one was probably the most watched of that bunch.
Yeah, I mean, and to remind everyone, I think we all watched the editor's cut, which is supposed to be the better version of this film.
It just made it longer.
Well, I was watching it with commentary, and it's just very telling when David Fincher's not even part of it because he wants nothing to do with this film, understandably.
I think
the editor is the one.
the
Yeah, he all but Alan Smithy this. Like Dune and Alien 3 are would-be Alan Smithy projects, but their names are attached. And it was the editor who was commenting on this mostly. And off the bat, he was talking about how it was just really hard to work on this film because things just weren't quite working out. And that's in the commentary of the official copy of this film. So they're they're not unafraid to say that this is a problem. They just had a bunch of people who worked on technical things about this, talking about things in somewhat of a positive light, like from their perspective, working on it technically. And there was one person saying that maybe some people are coming back and thinking this is like an underappreciated thing, and that's awesome from their perspective. But it is very telling, kind of the general attitude from the commentary, even on the disc, of how the reputation of this film has held up.
Yep.
Well,
I wanted to like it, David, but thankfully you made up for it for the rest of your career, and I was.
And again, I totally see it as like a necessary failure for
you know what sucks?
him to
go on.
better define what his trajectory was from there on in.
I mean, it is funny because if you told me, like, if this was my introduction to David Fincher, I would, I would probably never want to see another one of his films again. But
Yeah,
I'm glad that I saw Seven, which I think is a masterpiece. I'm
yeah.
glad that I
You
saw
actually had creative control on that one, so
Gone Girl, and I need to see The Social Network.
yes, you
And
do. Holy crap!
I
Have you seen
pray
The Girl
that
with the
they.
Dragon Tattoo?
It's funny. Somebody gave me a copy of that recently, but it's on Blu-ray, and I don't have a Blu-ray player. So
Oh, I think
theoretically,
it's on
I
Amazon.
have it. I
Yeah,
need to figure out a way to watch it,
yeah.
though. And
Here's
what
the
Blu-ray
sad part.
player.
You,
No, here's
yeah.
the thing that pisses me off, though. They gave me a copy of it. Like, they were like, "Oh, you like movies? Here, have this." And it was like this nice, special edition, and
Mm-hmm.
it's got the Blu-ray and the DVD inside. But
Oh yeah.
when I opened it up, because it had been open, there was two Blu-ray discs in there, and then there was
Oh
one
no.
DVD disc, but there was like a DVD ROM where they had like pirated it or
Oh,
something.
Oh.
I was
yeah.
like,
You
"What
got
the hell?"
boxed.
And of course, it won't play.
Oh,
It's like so I need to get a Blu-ray player
so
and
Oh,
watch that.
that almost pissed me off when I bought a secondhand copy of Nightcrawler where it was supposed to be Blu-ray and
oh yeah.
DVD, and it didn't have the I
Yeah,
think it had the DVD but didn't have the Blu-ray or vice versa. But it
yeah,
had half of.
Yeah.
That was the best era for home video, where the DVD, Blu-ray, digital combo packs. You had 3 copies of the movie in one
Oh
thing.
yeah,
That was that was the best time to get movies.
yeah, for sure.
You know what makes me angry? This movie made tons of money, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo made such little money that David Fincher couldn't do the sequels. I'm so pissed off about that. I'm so angry this movie made money. I'm so mad that's also his highest grossing movie,
This film wrestled everyone's jimmies,
including mine.
including David Fincher's. It is a sour note, but
I feel like I have a friend who loves this brand of sci-fi, of like that middle road kind of sci-fi. He likes these kind of derivative type movies, and I think he would have a possibly, genuine argument for it. And I'm curious about what that would be. I'm gonna ask him, and I'll let you guys know, um, what
yes.
what that
Well,
might be. I'm yeah.
you should possibly bring that up next week because next week is
Hey,
your very special episode. Devon, introduce what you're going to be
Oh,
talking about.
what are we talking about? I'm scared.
right from the degenerate thread.
Oh yeah,
Oh
Well,
boy.
this is this was a collection of films. So some time ago, I was absolutely blown away when I found or finally saw this film called Tetsuo the Iron Man, as suggested by a frequent user contributor on this forum, Rabid Fox. Um, and it was the one good film of the 3 films that he suggested that was like absolutely amazing, and it made me want to explore Tsukamoto's other filmography, and I jumped ahead to this little film of his called A Snake of June, and
The Snake of June or a Snake of June?
A Snake of June.
Got
It's
it.
an odd title. It's a Japanese film. It's very interesting. You can see my letterbox review for it. Um, but it made me think about, these other films of that all happen to take place in Japan, and it's about women going crazy after having some bad sexual experience. Um, so we're looking at a trilogy of films called the Psychosexual Misadventures in Sunrise Land, um, which is a
Japanese
mouthful
porn
of a title.
What are
with
the other two
extra
films?
steps.
No, it's more than that.
I
I think
mean,
there's some interesting,
sounds like it
I
sounds.
I would say Shinya Tsukamoto is like a Japanese David Cronenberg. Like he
I
explores
mean,
things
it
in
sounds
this
like
kind of vein.
Japanese porn with extra steps, but
So Cronenberg, yeah.
we'll dig into that.
What are the other
We'll
two
see
films,
how
sir?
next week.
Are you even on next week?
I am not on next week. No, I am not.
Oh,
I will be back the following week. Stay tuned,
well,
true believers.
I recommend that film anyway because it's only 77 minutes, which I have to
Cool.
appreciate, these films for being nice and short and sweet. But no, I think that there's a lot more happening with these films beneath the surface. And I can't wait to dive
No
right
pun
in.
intended.
Yeah. So, what were
Well,
the other two
until
films?
next
Sorry.
week.
Sorry again.
What were the other
No,
two
I said
films?
until next week.
You guys are talking over each other. One at
Sorry,
a time.
Steven, hold on. What were the other two films again? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. A Snake of June, Woman in the Dunes, and Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue's been on my list for a long
Oh,
time.
that's
and
been on
I've
mine
been...
too, actually. So,
Oh
thank you.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
We looked at Tokyo Godfathers some time ago, and I've been wanting to look more into that guy's work.
Yeah.
So, just crossing off a few things, and all the titles kind of rhyme. So I felt like there was a good theme here. We're gonna explore that fully later, and we should have Soraya on board for next week, which was really exciting.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
Well,
I can't wait to hear her perspective on these films.
Nice.
Well, it has definitely been a pleasure, gentlemen, and until next time, thanks for tuning in.
Is it first day yet?
Oh yeah.
Stay
Shout
tuned
out to
for
Daryl
Conan.
for listening in.
Hey.
Yes.
Thank you,
The
Daryl.
one person who actually listens to this.
And being our Jamie, looking up facts when I'm misremembering people's names.
Yes, thank you.
Good night, everybody.